Production begins in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, and welcome to United Way Update. I'm Vicki Mealy, Outreach and Communications Manager with United Way of the Lower Eastern Shore. And today I have a very special guest. It is the City of Salisbury's 28th Mayor, Jake Day. Welcome.
Hi, Vicki. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. You're very welcome, and we're so happy to have you.
Honored to be here.
So I think almost everyone knows who you are, and they also know that you are a local to Salisbury. You grew up here right in the Camden neighborhood, and I understand you live there now
I do.
as well.
I do. Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in Salisbury and how that kind of prepared you or maybe even inspired you to get involved in local government?
Sure. Well, I think that there are teachers that I had that are still teaching, so I'm not that old, that would tell you that they knew this was what I wanted to do. They knew I wanted to do things like this. I've heard it, and I did too. I had a sense that I wanted to serve my community, that I loved this place and wanted to see it become everything that I thought it could be. And that vision has changed and matured over time. But I really believe this place can be one of the great small American cities. So that's the path that I've been on since, that I've hoped to help Salisbury along since I was a little kid. But I will say this, it takes sometimes a little bit of perspective to realize what advantages you got as a kid. And recently in the Leadership Maryland program, we had this exercise at the end of the program where they put a piece of blue tape across the floor. And my classmates were, the presidents of banks and, the vice president of football operations at the Ravens. Believe me, he was the most popular guy in the class. And we had this exercise where they asked you a question about, did you grow up seeing violence in your neighborhood? And if so, you take a step backward. Everybody was, towing the line. You take a step backward. Did you grow up being told you could be anything you wanted to be? Take a step forward. And there were these questions about, what your early life was like. And as I, the 33-year-old in the class, realized that I was miles ahead of everybody else, it suddenly dawned on me that I hadn't had to overcome some of the things other people did, and really because of the adults in this community. It wasn't like, it wasn't about rich or poor, it wasn't about any of those things. It was, what were the adults in your community giving to you, in your neighborhood, in your home, in your family, in your classrooms, in your schools? I realized, wow, I grew up in a place, Salisbury, where adults really took care of their kids and were really wrapping around each child and helping them to become more than they otherwise would be.
Absolutely, and that having that great role model, the mentorship, whether it's direct or indirect, that is so important in
Indeed.
Developing a child, and seeing other people have success motivates you to have success.
Absolutely.
And so, can you tell me anything about your past experiences with United Way?
Sure.
Like, I know, for example, the City of Salisbury has an annual employee campaign, and last year raised almost $8,000 for our United Way. So thank you.
Right. That's right.
Very much.
Of course. Yeah, among the 425 employees, we had a lot of folks participate, and we did raise over $7,000, almost $8,000. It's something we want to continue to do, and there are a lot of companies in Salisbury that I work with and talk to on a frequent basis that see United Way as almost an extension of their own business practice. They look at that as I don't want to say the philanthropic arm, but really, inseparable partner in our community and for their particular businesses.
Great. And any experience with United Way agency partners? I heard somebody told me that you were a Boy Scout.
I was.
Yeah.
Now, I never reached Eagle Scout, and I keep going to these Eagle Scout ceremonies now, and I have to admit every single time I'm not an Eagle Scout. But I reached Life Scout, and we were.
That's the second highest,
yeah,
right?
I think
That's
that
the
Life or
second highest.
Star, I can't even
Yeah.
remember which is which, but
Okay.
right in that area. But for me, it was It was a place where my friends were. It was another place where I had great mentors. It was another place where I got to experience everything that's great about the Eastern Shore. You know, you got to camp, you got to go on various trips. We got to experience our community, our churches. I loved the Boy Scouts, and so I'm working even more closely now with the Boy Scouts, with the Delmarva Council of the Boy Scouts than ever before. Recently attended their Southern Advisory Committee meeting to talk about really how are we going to work together to uplift our kids. How are we going to work to be like the generation that, you know, wrapped those arms around me and my peers to wrap our arms around the next generation. So I think that's a great organization. There are, you know, a lot of organizations that support young people that I think United Way supports, that we want to be a part of. We, the city of Salisbury, want to acknowledge, you know, it's time for us to step up and be a partner in helping to raise our kids in this community.
Absolutely. And, you know, to talk about the Boy Scouts a little bit, our United Way, we fund their outreach program, which makes scouting available to low-income families or at-risk youth, and it's really making a difference in these kids, their character development, having access to those great role models, and so it's a wonderful program. And so we're very happy that you were a scout too, because you can talk about it, and you get it, and you understand it. And so to shift gears a little bit. As you probably know, our United Way provides, well, just in the last year, we provided $1.3 million annually to financial stability, educational opportunities, and health programs. But what do you think, you know, those being our three impact areas, what do you think offers the most room for improvement in Salisbury?
Sure. Well, it'll come to no surprise. It'll come as no surprise to you or anybody else that, you know, I'm a cheerleader for Salisbury. I love this place. I want to see it grow. I want to see it continue to thrive. You know, we've seen good news after good news recently. You know, one being ranked the 42nd fastest growing metro area economy and job market in the United States for 2015 just last week. So, you know, we're very excited about all of that. But if we're not simultaneously as a community uplifting those who are struggling most, you know, I think we've really lost ourselves and lost our way. So I think one of the things that we're struggling with most and that we're challenged by most, and we're not unique, is addiction and the consequences of addiction, and which leads to homelessness, mental health issues, poverty, you know, and eroding some of those characteristics of a community that we were just talking about that we want, where adults are uplifting kids. So I think that's one of the areas that we can make a really powerful impact. And United Way has recently stepped up to be a partner in providing some funding and some services around a outreach program for to talk to kids about addiction. We're going to bring in a national speaker. We're going to talk to kids. We're going to go around to each of the high schools. We're also going to have a community forum where we're going to talk about what is this drug, you know, heroin, opioids, and what impact is it having, and how do we avoid this? As young people who can be easily influenced, this is the place where that conversation needs to happen. And really, what are the consequences? So, you know, when you're, for example, when you're a professional skater or BMX biker and you throw your entire career away, you know, potentially millions and millions of dollars, potentially fame and fortune, and you throw all of that away. You know, there are other examples out there, you know, professional basketball player, and really the point there is it touches every life. It's touching every life. You either know somebody, or you're related to somebody, or you are struggling with addiction, and it's not something to be ashamed of. It's something we need to work on together. And you know, to see Wycomico County, the City of Salisbury, the Sheriff's Office, the State's Attorney's Office, and the Health Department working together to produce this new program, the community outreach action teams, and then to have that public conversation supported by great organizations like United Way, we are just so grateful. And I think it's a good moment where we can look around and say, we're leading our peer communities. You know, we're trying to be more aggressive and honest with ourselves than our peer communities.
And I have read something really interesting about that COAT program, Community Outreach Addiction Team, is that they were going to be sending recovered addicts out on overdose calls, or is it?
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Okay.
So what we'll be doing in the health department and the state's attorney's office, we'll be managing this team, and there will be deputy sheriffs involved, out of uniform, plain clothes, who are there for safety purposes. And the intent is to go directly to the places where people are using, and not to show up to arrest them for that, but to show up and say, hey, I've been where you've been, and we're going to help you. We've got a better path for you. So it's a really interesting program. And that peer counselor piece, that person who's been there and seen it and experienced it, is a critical component. You know, it won't work without that. I think that's fundamental to it. Somebody's got to be able to grab them by the shoulders, look them in the eye, and say, "We've got you.
right.
I've been there. You need us. So let's work together." So we're excited to be a small partner, a small supporter, and then this program where we're going to bring a speaker to each of the high schools and one event for the public is very exciting. City Council Vice President Laura Mitchell has been instrumental in coordinating that, and really it's all because of our community partners like United Way who have made that possible.
Great. And so you've recently proposed a new budget. Are you in the process of getting you're getting it approved at this point? Or
We are. So it's finalized because the last session was last week, and the council votes on it. The second vote is Monday night.
Okay, great. So no pressure.
Right, fingers crossed.
Yeah. So in that budget, there are some really hopeful plans to address some of the city of Salisbury's social issues. One of those being directed at youth, as we were talking about before. And our United Way is one of the largest non-governmental contributors to education, youth, recreational mentoring programs. I believe it was $340,000 this year.
Wow.
But we so need government and we so need to work together. What are some of those items in the budget for as far as our youth?
Sure. Well, let's talk about how we got there for a moment. About a year and a half ago, we were having a public debate and conversation about a curfew. And really this came from a few people in a few neighborhoods that were fed up with what they were seeing. And you can understand why. They felt they were being disrespected on their own streets. And these were, kids who could have been their grandkids. So in Doverdale and the West Side, people felt like they were being disrespected in their streets. They were hearing language they didn't want to hear. They were seeing behavior they didn't want to see. And you can understand why they were upset. And we're upset by that too. I'm upset by that too. So one of the responses was, based on the request. The request was explicitly, give us a curfew because we can't deal with this. And the response was to take Baltimore's curfew legislation and put it before the city council. Well, we went out and we had a couple public meetings, and I think we heard loud and clear that people were also concerned, but didn't understand why we were taking this approach. And so the city council, hearing that, took an approach of saying, not right now. We're not going to move forward with that right now. And out of that blossomed a conversation during the election about community centers, youth development centers. And also what blossomed out of that was this whole notion of curfew plus. And I like to flip that on its head now, in my position, and say it's more about the plus first, and curfew maybe second. And here's why. If we're going to look kids in the eye who are growing up in this community, and we're going to say, hey, we're going to lock you up for being awake at night and being out on the street at night. And look, they shouldn't be out there. They should be in bed. But we're going to lock you up. Before we're ever saying anything like, hey, we're going to help you succeed. I think we're making a pretty big mistake, a pretty strategic error. And in addition to that, while organizations like United Way are out there raising and spending $340,000 on kids, what do you think the city of Salisbury has spent on kids?
Oh gosh.
Nothing. We're not. That's not what we're doing. You know that we've
Yeah.
got the Board of Education. We've got these great institutions: YMCA, Salvation Army, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. You know, there are great institutions out there whose purpose is to help kids. But if we're going to take that regulatory approach, let's at least be able to say we're going to be a part of the solution as well.
Absolutely.
So, what do we have in the budget? We've got three things that I think we need to talk about. First is support for recreation. And this is really an engagement tool. It's not to say that we think, helping kids play a sport is the solution in and of itself, but it's a part of the engagement process. And also, I'll say one of those great experiences I had with adults as a kid was Tom Brown's Rookie League. And the lessons I learned from Tom Brown about sportsmanship, about respect, about teamwork. One of my best memories, and it's more than one memory as a kid, was the experience we'd have anytime a parent would yell at their kid from the stands. Tom Brown would stop the game. It gives me butterflies even thinking. He would stop the game. He would walk over the fence. He'd call that parent over. And you don't see this in Little League, elsewhere in America. You see parents yelling and taking it too seriously. And he'd stop the game, and he'd walk over, and he'd call the parent up, embarrass them in front of everybody, and say, "You're going to sit the rest of the time in the car, or we're not playing until you close your mouth." And Tom had his way of doing it far better than I can. But it was such a beautiful thing that he was truly there for the kids. And when an adult would forget that, he'd remind them.
Yep.
So I think there's a couple things that we want to pull off this year that the police chief, Barbara Duncan in particular, is focused on. And that is a cyclocross program. And cyclocross is not something I was familiar with before, but it's a team sport, essentially, that is extreme biking. And it's off-road, kind of through trails.
Cool.
And so our hope is to be able to provide bikes and helmets. And we're working with a church, New Dimensions Church, who has the space and who has trails through a wooded area near their church that they've built. We're going to take kids and say, instead of riding through, weaving through traffic with no helmet on, why don't we take you somewhere that you're going to get a thrill, and why don't we give you a bike and give you a helmet? And here's a place where you can ride safely. And let's train them up into a team, and let's be competitive throughout the region.
Yeah.
We're also going to fund some girls softball and lacrosse programs, and again, just acknowledging that there are cost barriers to participating in youth sports, and there are a lot of people who simply can't do it because they can't afford the equipment or the participation fees. Now, the second thing that we're working on is a summer employment program, a youth summer jobs program. And again, this is us acknowledging that if we're not going to have a pathway for these kids to be employable and to be successful and to do the right thing in life, we can only blame ourselves for any of the problems we have to deal with. So we're going to take young people this year, 10 to 20 young people this summer, and say, right out of high school or for the summer, we're going to give you a job. And we're going to provide services like managing finances, soft skills development, showing up to work on time, being polite, professional, all those things. And also, you're going to make money. We're going to pay you above minimum wage. You're going to make more money doing this than you could most things at your age, at far more than I made at 14, 15, 16, and working in Salisbury. And we're going to put you in a position where you can be successful and walk out of there with a resume. The business community, Greater Salisbury Committee, is going to help them develop a resume. Junior Achievement of the Eastern Shore is going to help them with the skill development. And we're going to then give them a reference. They're going to have a reference. The Director of Public Works for the City of Salisbury, somebody who manages well over 100 people, a $30 million budget. The Mayor of Salisbury, I know that matters less, but who manages 425 people and a $57 million budget. We're going to be your references. And people will take that relatively seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Again, they'll take it more seriously with the Director of Public Works than they will me, but that's what we'll be doing. And the third program is a community center. And this is straight from the curfew conversation. This was every single candidate for city council talked about this, and I talked about it during the election, and it's something that we're all serious about. So we've got $500,000 in the budget for a capital project to build or renovate a community center in the city, and hopefully by next year we would be able to stand up operations in that center. We're also Monday night, we are going to be appointing 37 people to the Youth Development Advisory Committee, which is going to be our first committee that's going to guide our future investments on projects like that. That's going to make recommendations to me on projects like that.
Great.
Yeah.
So I also understand that there were some funds in the budget for homelessness relief and reduction,
Yes.
affordable housing. Can you talk a little bit about those issues as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at cities like Washington, D.C., like Los Angeles, Philadelphia, much larger places, these cities have an active role in reducing homelessness. When you look at a place like Salisbury, that's not something that we have taken an active role in. We've done some things to beautify the city. So we have removed homeless encampments throughout the city. We've got a partnership of our neighborhood services and code compliance department and our police department. They go out and they actually remove these encampments, and then they talk directly to the individuals and they try to get them in shelters and in housing. And then we have, in several instances, our director of neighborhood services and her staff have worked directly with people who are homeless to get them into an apartment, to get them furniture. There was a gentleman, veteran, just the other day who the U-Haul donated the truck. Diakonia, the homeless shelter in Worcester County, donated the furniture, and a landlord gave reduced rent on the apartment, and we got him in an apartment, and he didn't have to spend another night on the street, which was a powerful thing. So we've been working on this, and we're all dealing with the consequences. I mean, you look at Route 13, and you can see the problem is there. There are people who are homeless who are spending their day walking around with not much else to do. And there are deeper issues, of course, in many cases. There are, of course, economic and job issues, some cases substance abuse or mental health issues. But those are all things that are difficult to address if you don't have an address for that person.
Absolutely.
Really difficult to address. So what these cities, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Los Angeles, really the state of Utah is the leader on this. What they've figured out, particularly in Utah, is that if you take a housing first approach and not a housing only approach, and that's always the critique, oh, well, you're worrying about housing and not the other things. No, housing first approach, and that's why it's called housing first. We will put these individuals who are chronically homeless into an apartment by partnering with property owners, getting them into an apartment, and then providing intensive case management, wraparound services around that individual, and saying, you're going to meet with a psychologist on a regular basis. We're going to provide you any support you need on mental health, on substance abuse, you name it. So we're taking 10 individuals this year who are chronically homeless, who have been identified by the Continuum of Care, the COC, and that's all the homeless organizations, homelessness reduction organizations in the area, the COC, and we're going to fund, the city is going to fund the housing for those 10 individuals. And we have to grow it to 20 next year, grow it to 30 the following year, and so on and so forth. And we've been talking to some funders about how do we sustain this, because we want to create permanent supportive housing, not just a sort of rapid response. We want to create permanent housing. And most of these people, and in fact to be eligible, have income. So they may have disability insurance, they may have disability, they may have SSI, they may have veterans benefits, but they've got some sort of income. And in most cases they have a bank account, but they don't have any credit. And then they've got other issues that are preventing them from being stable in terms of managing their own rent and things like that.
And that's a very similar model to what a lot of our partner agencies, the United Way funds as well. I was on a site visit last week at Samaritan Ministries, and they're down in Pocomoke, and that was the number one thing, was that the issue with the homeless not having a permanent address, it's so difficult for them to get the services that they need to turn their lives around if they don't have an address. And it's something that I've never experienced in my life, so it didn't put two and two together that this is so critical. It's not just giving someone a place to stay.
That's right.
It's once you have that place to stay, then you need to work on all of the things to make sure you can sustain a
That's
home.
right. And I think people will always run into crisis. So there will always be a need for shelters.
Yes.
And we have great shelters in the area. You know, the Christian Shelter, Halo, they do wonderful things. They're not going anywhere. They also don't take any government dollars. You know, those are privately funded organizations. So what we want to do is get people who are chronically homeless, the ones who have been homeless for years and years, into a better and safer position.
So I'm not sure if all of our viewers are aware of this, but the City of Salisbury receives, I believe, federal funds for community block grants, and that is basically a way for you to award different nonprofits in the area sums of money to help improve services in the area. Can you tell us a little bit about how that process works and how a nonprofit might apply for that?
Sure. So we receive community development block grant funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It passes through the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. And they can be used for a variety of things, but it's all toward low and moderate income areas. So it's all used to support the areas in our community that are suffering most. And we've done a variety of things with them. We have provided sidewalks in low and moderate income areas. This year we'll be putting in $20,000 worth of sidewalks in the Church Street neighborhood. We continue to do that year after year. We also are providing housing assistance. So we actually offer, for homeowners, we offer grants essentially to assist with closing costs and down payment on houses. So if you're interested in buying a house in the city, there is a funding source. And in fact, the Salisbury Neighborhood Housing Service is the agency which is a private company that the city helped found years ago. But it's a private agency, and they will be administering that program this year. So if you're looking to buy a house anytime soon, there's money available through SNHS. We work with Habitat for Humanity. Habitat will be building a house this year with those funds, with the funds they're getting. Telamon Corporation, which will be assisting people. I imagine these are
They're all
organizations
United Way
that United Way,
agencies.
that
It's
United Way
wonderful.
funds. Yeah, so it's a real partnership, you know, both between what United Way does and what the city is doing. We're aimed in the same direction, very much in the same direction. So Telamon Corporation helps people get into housing or avoid some of the challenges that they have through that they're experiencing through assistance, you know, navigating those challenging times where you're having trouble making a mortgage payment or something like that. And a lot of people face that. And certainly in a recession, we know a lot of people did face that. And that's cyclical. So one day again, you know, I'm sure we'll all face those same challenges. But other organizations are welcome to apply. And you'd simply need to contact Debbie Stam, S-T-A-M, in the city of Salisbury. And our email addresses have gotten really easy. So in her case, it's first initial, last name. All of us are first initial, last name, right? D Stam, D-S-T-A-M, at salisbury.md.
Great.
Pretty straightforward. So we changed our domain. Our web address is salisbury.md. That's it.
Great.
That's all there is to it, just salisbury.md. And so our email address is salisbury.md.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time.
Okay.
But if you all want to get more news and information about the city of Salisbury,
Go to salisbury.md.
And if you want more information about United Way of the Lower Eastern Shore, you can visit www.unitedway4us.org. So thank you, Jake. Your commitment to collaborating with nonprofits in our city is just amazing, and we thank you so much for what you do.
Vicki, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for tuning in to the May edition of United Way Update. Please watch PAC 14 streaming live on the web at www.pac14.org.
Would you like to see your community organization or nonprofit group featured on PAC 14? To get started, contact us at 410-677-5014 or visit our website at www.pac14.org. PAC 14 is a great way to connect with your community.